Chaos broke out in the studio after Sarukhanov's question. Does anyone really hope that aid to Ukraine will be cancelled? What do you think will happen next? Are there really any optimists in this studio who think that America will not extend this military aid package or provide a new one? In general, will abandon Ukraine and not help it? Does anyone really think so? Are there any such ideas? Yes, please. Is it really possible that Boris is just wondering what kind of aid there will be? You are absolutely right. Sarukhanov tried to convince everyone that aid to Ukraine will not stop. After all, the US still provides intelligence data, and no one will even think of cutting this aid. Nevertheless, I remind you, the HIMARS fly reconnaissance. The data is still being loaded into these HIMARS, into these installations, by those very same NATO guys who are either on vacation or with some special assignment in the territory of the SVO, or they were fired yesterday with some retroactive effect, and so on. But nevertheless, all the intelligence that Ukraine receives today, it receives from those very same Western partners. They have not radically reduced anything there. That is, and still this is a factor in their opposition to Russia. Therefore, there is no need, again, to put on rose-colored glasses here. Earlier, propagandists were shouting that Ukraine alone would not be enough for them, that they need to seize all of Europe, and now they are beginning to understand that in more than 3 years they have not achieved their main goal. Now they are frightened by the fact that they have a chance to meet NATO face to face one day. But, Roman, there is a truly frightening moment in this whole story. Trump is a boxer, he is somewhere over the Atlantic and the move is poor. We will always come to an agreement with him. Moreover, there is this positive track today internally. Yes, we communicate with them. This is not the stubborn Biden administration, but there is another monkey with a grenade, which is arming, arming and arming. These are the Europeans. They are really going to fight with us at least by 2030, because you can see how they are rearming, what budgets they are laying down, how their economy is gradually getting on a war footing. Babian made it clear to Sarukhanov that he should not underestimate and try to ridicule the leaders of NATO countries. Russia is already at the bottom, and the Zetniks can only ask questions. What should we do? That is, these are not politicians, these are not managers, these are some kind of bad managers who cannot be trusted with just a cart, you know, from the supermarket. I understand all this perfectly well, but these are the bad managers who you can't trust with a cart. One works as NATO Secretary General, another works as German Chancellor, a third works as British Prime Minister, a fourth works as French President, a fifth sits out overseas working as US President. And what to do with all this now? Sarukhanov is worried that Russia will soon cross the line, and Europe will stop warning them about anything. NATO countries will strike. I am still worried, and my colleagues have rightly noted that a certain military crisis is brewing in the Baltic, that they are already still latently threatening us that our ships will not pass there and so on, that the blockade of Kaliningrad is real, of course, and our officials are talking about it. He sang another fairy tale about how Russia allegedly does not want to fight. They simply have no choice. The question is, how far will this monkey with a grenade go? What should we do? Because we don't want to fight. But the question is that it looks like we're not being left with a choice. The colonel believes that a plant is being set up in Ukraine to assemble Taurus missiles. He says that the Germans will only supply spare parts for them, so the missiles will be considered Ukrainian. The
Germans have made a clever move. The British, apparently, suggested, no, we won't have missiles on the net. But they're only bringing components. And they'll be assembling them, according to unofficial data. You also sometimes operate unofficially. While a plant is already being set up where Ukrainians will assemble them, of course, with the help of the Germans, they'll be assembling Taurus missiles on Ukrainian territory. And now you can't say that these are German missiles. They just sold the components, the spare parts were sold. Elements, systems, whatever you want. And the blocks. So how can you prove it now?
Another blow to the Kremlin's pride. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban said that Russia is too weak to threaten Europe. And no one is even trying to argue with this statement anymore. Russian experts admit that they have been unable to cope with Ukraine for 4 years now, and any talk of attacking NATO looks absurd. Political scientist Vadim Trukachev said that Orban is right and Russia really would not withstand a large-scale conflict with Europe. At the same time, he tried to justify himself by saying that Moscow had no intention of attacking anyone.
Let's talk about Orban. It is believed, as they write again on the internet, that he is our elephant in Europe on par with the same Fico and, perhaps, even with Ulucic. Well, yes, you already understand what I'm getting at, and I'll explain for the audience. Viktor Orban, Prime Minister of Hungary. Well, it is believed that he maintains neutrality, and this is how European politicians should be. It may be so, but not long ago he surprised us with his statement to the French media. In general terms, what he said was this: I am not afraid that the war in Ukraine will spread to the rest of the world, because the Russians, are too weak for that. They can't even defeat Ukraine, so they won't be able to attack NATO. Quote, in Ukraine, first there needs to be a ceasefire, then peace. Neither the Europeans nor the Ukrainians will be able to come to an agreement with the Russians. Russia needs to make an agreement with the United States. A direct conflict with Russia is not at all what Hungary or the European Union needs.
What he said is not the most pleasant words for us, that Russia is too weak, but he is right. Yes, we are not here to attack Europe. We are weak, of course. We don't need that. Why, strictly speaking, should we attack Europe? Yes, something that cannot, they say, even defeat Ukraine, but this is what we talked about, in the first part. By victory, we mean a very rapid advance to the west. Well, strictly speaking, here Orbit confirmed what I am talking about. Yes, until Russia liberates Kharkiv, Zaporozhye, they will think that we are weak enough, just to draw a conclusion from this. Orban run to these are the core confrontations of the European Union in recent years that are made different, yes. The organ, believes that if Russia is not so strong, then it is quite possible to negotiate with it. RUT believes that since Russia is not very strong, it is NATO. A similar position is held by Perebeshchak Mikhailo Nufrienko, who added that Russia has not achieved any of the key goals, including being unable to disable Ukraine's energy infrastructure.
We have been destroying the enemy's energy structure for 3 seasons in a row. Have we destroyed it? No, there is even electricity in Kyiv. Not only in Kyiv, by the way.
Yes, it is everywhere. He admitted that the strikes were ineffective, because they prefer not to strike at the enemy's logistics, but try to ruin the lives of the civilian population.
We understand that the military-industrial complex enterprises and everything related to the war are supplied with electricity first. The population will be disconnected from electricity first. If something happens, the strikes that were carried out satisfied you for 20 seconds. There were strikes today too. Well, last night, 20 seconds short. I have no explanation for why we prefer to strike at the enemy's energy structure, and not at the enemy's logistics across the Dnieper. I have no answer for the 3rd year. The 4th, that
the analytics that are provided, they seek to justify the current state of affairs.
There are no safe places now. I don't know what will happen next. A difficult protracted conflict with a very serious enemy. Russian television continues to admire Operation Web and is no longer embarrassed to admit that it was a complete failure for them. ZTV Venkor Alexander Kotso said that the strikes on their airfields cannot be called terrorist attacks, because they are military targets. What happened to our planes all over the country? I'll be honest, I'm not inclined to classify this as terrorist attacks. We are at war, after all. We are in a difficult protracted conflict with a very serious enemy. I'm not talking about the collective West now, I'm talking about the Ukrainians in their pure form, but because they are a very dangerous, cunning, inventive and insidious enemy. I'm also not a supporter of blaming everything on Western intelligence agencies. Many of our highly respected authoritative experts today say, it wasn't the Ukrainians who did this, it was Misha there, it was the SAD, it was the CIA. Listen, let's not turn our enemy, the heavy enemy we are fighting on the ground, into some kind of stupid monkey that is incapable of anything without its curators Mishesti or Masad. That's not true, and the Ukrainians are very inventive, very, cunning, as I already said, some planes that we no longer make, well, like the Tu-95, for example, yes, the idea itself, the execution itself, it seems to me, is purely Ukrainian. And I would still say that this is sabotage, not a terrorist attack, because we are fighting, and they attack military airfields, not civilian ones. What happened in terms of execution? Yes, we see this, very, painstakingly prepared in conspiracy theories, conditionally conspiracy theories, sabotage, when, in a filmed warehouse, they prepared several trucks, which loaded up portable trailers, yes, in the roof of which devices were mounted, in which there were all the front-facing drones, controlled via cellular internet through GSM modules. There are a lot of questions. Firstly, well, we turned out to be completely unprepared for the fact that there is no rear with these technologies. The question of using FPV drones in the deep rear, but it was a matter of time. Here you go, this time has come. The question that we have also been discussing, but I don't know how many years. The question of protecting our aircraft at airfields. The question of physical protection. We are now getting videos from, I think, 2021, where our former head of the Ministry of Defense says that the construction of reinforced concrete shelters at airfields has begun. Where these reinforced concrete shelters are, is unclear. There are no safe places now. I don't know what will happen next. Maybe there will be a submarine base in Kamchatka, nuclear submarines, or in Vedyevo, yes, in the Northern Fleet. Anything at all. Or launches or silos, launch silos there for our strategic nuclear forces. I don't know what will happen next. The question is again about the work of agents, when such a, well, whole organization, yes, a covert one, operates in Russia. Why hasn't it been exposed? There are, of course, many questions about this.
Surukhanov tried to convince everyone that support for Ukraine would not stop. The US continues to share intelligence data. Previously, propagandists claimed that Ukraine alone was not enough for them, they needed all of Europe. Now, having realized that they have not achieved their goals in more than 3 years, they are frightened by the prospect of a direct clash with NATO. Babian reminded Surukhanov that laughing at the leaders of NATO countries is stupid. Russia is at a dead end, and the Zetniks are left with only questions about what to do now. Surukhanov is worried that Russia may cross the line, after which Europe will stop warning and launch a surprise attack. He repeated again, allegedly, Russia does not want war, it simply has no other choice. The colonel said that Taurus missiles are being prepared in Ukraine. Allegedly the Germans will only transfer components, which means that the missiles will be considered Ukrainian. What do you think will happen next? Well, are there really any optimists in this studio who think that America will not extend this military aid package or will not allocate a new one, basically, will abandon Ukraine and will not help it? Well, is there really anyone who thinks so? Are there really such jokes? Are there such people? There are some. Please, 3 Felipes, really, will this one not extend another one? Nevertheless, let me remind you, intelligence data is still flying. These very same NATO guys are loading these installations into these HIMARS. Today, they are on the territory where the joint operation is being conducted, either on vacation, or with some special assignment, or they were fired yesterday retroactively, and so on. But nevertheless, all the intelligence data that Ukraine receives today, it receives from those very same Western partners. They have not radically reduced anything there. That is, and all the same, this is still a factor in their opposition to Russia. So, again, there is no need to put on rose-colored glasses here. But, Roman, there is a truly frightening moment in this whole story. Trump is a boxer, he is somewhere over the Atlantic and the going is poor. We will always come to an agreement with him. Moreover, there is this positive track today internally, yes, we communicate with them. This is not the crazy Biden administration, but there is another monkey with a grenade, which is arming, and arming. These are the Europeans. They are really going to fight with us at least by 2030, because you can see how they are rearming, what budgets they are laying down, how their economy is gradually getting on a war footing. That is, these are not politicians, these are not managers, these are some kind of bad managers who cannot be trusted with just a cart, you know, from a supermarket. I understand all this perfectly, but these bad managers who you cannot trust with a cart, one works as the Secretary General of NATO, the other works as the Chancellor of Germany. Danimsasim as the US President. And what to do with all this now? Here, Roman, is the big question: where will all this lead? I am still worried, and my colleagues have rightly noted, that a certain military crisis in the Baltic is brewing, that they are already still latently threatening us, that our ships will not pass through there, and so on, that the blockade of Kaliningrad is real, of course, and our officials are talking about this. The question is, how far will this monkey with a grenade go? What should we do? Because we don't want to fight, but the question is that, it seems, we are not being left with a choice. The Germans went for a cunning move. The British, apparently, suggested, no, we will not send missiles to Ukraine. No, they are only transporting components. And they will assemble this for now according to unofficial data. You also sometimes operate unofficially. While a plant is already being created, where Ukrainians will assemble, of course, with the help of the Germans, they will assemble Tauruses on the territory of Ukraine. And now it is impossible to say that these are German missiles. They simply sold, component parts, spare parts were sold, elements, systems, whatever you want. Well, and blocks. Well, how now? How will you prove it? And what to do with those we free? Can you imagine what kind of enemy agents we will acquire? This has never happened before. Russian radio suddenly announced that they do not need to seize Ukraine after all. After so many years, it is obvious to everyone that Russia does not have the strength to achieve its goals. Because of this, propagandists received a new task, namely, to convince the people that they need the entire territory of Ukraine, because they do not have the money to restore the destroyed cities. Russian military experts and colonels said that viewers are demanding new victories and conquests. But this turned out to be not so simple, because they have been brainwashing the people for years, and many are now demanding to go to the borders of 1939. And propaganda has to find an excuse and explain that this is still impossible.
Are we going to take Ukraine? Please, Mikhail Vladimirovich, that is true. As soon as we broke through to the Dnipropetrovsk region, Viktor Nikolaevich and I were inundated with letters. Take, and that's it, there's no point in arguing here. And we'll just talk, the difference is where to go. Basically, you could say, to the borders of 1939. That's it. Let's try to lay out the cards on the table, so to speak. First, the attitude of society. Well, the Ukrainians have shirkers, we have relaxers. Will they lay down their heads, yes, for this Ukraine or what? Got it. Thanks for the answer. And then the economy. Let's see what state the economy is in now.
That is, state propaganda has just admitted that the Russians themselves no longer want to sacrifice their lives for the sake of territories. And they also said that they don't even have the money to restore the cities that were captured 3 years ago. And what can we say about new conquests?
Mariupol. Like Mariupol, when you look at it, it's like a picture. And people already live the same way as, say, in Kazan. Not yet. And why didn't we restore Azovstal? It's up in the air. It means there wasn't enough money and specialized forces that restore such production. And what kind of plant was it? That is, they came to the territory of Ukraine, burned the cities, and now they say that they won't be able to restore all of this. What can I say? A real liberation. Earlier, they assured that Russia would restore everything and it would be even better than before.
Come on, you have to look at the ruins. Remember the ruins of Stalingrad, look at the ruins of Minsk. You understand, when it is necessary, there is nothing left. My grandfather told me, he says, have never seen anything like this. Because when it is necessary to liberate the land, we must liberate it, and we will restore and regret it later.
But now no one is even trying to save face. And if, for example, we really push through somewhere into the boulder, take Kharkiv, Dnipropetrovsk, Nikolaev, I won't even mention Odessa yet. There is nothing to restore there. What money? The belly button will not come undone. Has anyone thought about this? No, and that is a question. But now they don't need Kharkiv and Dnieper. After all, there is no point in leaving the ruins. Our president said that we need to take all of Ukraine. He hasn't said what yet. About the security strip or line. And what to do with those we liberate. Can you imagine what kind of enemy agents we will immediately acquire? And what will happen? So that is a question.
It is simply amazing. In the 4th year of the war, they still haven't figured out what to do with the so-called liberated Ukrainians. And now they are not brothers, but potential enemies for all of Russia.
There is a wonderful idea of building a temple of the armed forces of Russia. And I absolutely support this idea, because the temple will be built by the 75th anniversary of the victory. I am sure that this important, grandiose project of building the main temple of the armed forces of Russia will definitely be implemented as a large national people's project. As a retired colonel, I fully support the initiative that arose within the walls of the Ministry of Defense and personally from the Minister of Defense Sergei Kozhagatovich Shoigu on the construction of the main temple of the Ministry of Defense of all military personnel on the territory of the Moscow region in Patriot Park. We are talking about the construction of the main temple of the armed forces of the Russian Federation in Patriot Park. I fully support this. I support it, including as a person who was related to the armed forces, wore the uniform.
The temple that is planned to be built now by the whole world is primarily associated with the Great Patriotic War. But in general, this is a temple to our entire army. Building a temple has always been considered a sacred cause in Rus, and it is doubly sacred when it comes to our army, to people who are ready to sacrifice their lives, to shed blood for our fatherland. A wonderful idea to build a temple to the Russian army. A new initiative has appeared. Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu called on everyone to support the initiative to build a temple on the territory of the park. All this is done with voluntary donations, that is, with our money, with the money of those people who want to invest in this truly good cause. The Ministry of Defense, in my opinion, has done, perhaps, the main thing that has been missing over the past few years. I mean the beginning of the construction of a temple in the Patriot Park near Moscow, a temple dedicated to the entire Russian Christ-loving army. And I call on everyone who understands the meaning of this to take part in this. And I myself want to contribute to this common pot, to this common piggy bank for the construction of the temple. And in Patriot Park 500,000 rubles. I urge everyone to do as much as possible, within their capabilities, but with a pure soul.
Russians have collected almost 2 billion rubles for the construction of the Temple of the Armed Forces. It is being built in Kubinka near Moscow with public money. Weapons that will become building materials. The military showed the captured arsenal of the Great Patriotic War, which will be used in the construction of the main Temple of the Armed Forces. Yes, Sergei Shoigu himself said this, right?
He said that captured German equipment from the Great Patriotic War has found a use in the armed forces. They will cast the very ordinary
steps of the Ministry of Defense Temple, which is currently being built in Patriot Park. All parishioners of the main temple of the Russian armed forces will trample the captured weapons of the Third Reich underfoot. It is from them that the wonderful steps and the front porch will be cast. The
weapons created by the Wehrmacht to defeat the USSR eventually became trophies for the Red Army. This entire arsenal will be melted down and then used to build the country's main military temple in Patriot Park.
Construction of the main church of the Russian armed forces is underway in Kubinka near Moscow. The cross will rise to a height of 100 meters. The majestic temple is being built with public donations, and it will open its doors on the day of the 75th anniversary of the Great Victory.
Vladimir Putin took part in the ceremony of consecrating the foundation stone of the main temple of the Russian armed forces. The service was
held by His Holiness Patriarch Kirill of Moscow and all Rus. The construction will be completed in 2020, the 75th anniversary of the victory over fascism. Your Eminences, most reverend lords, fathers, brothers and sisters, we have accomplished deeds that will be inscribed in the history of the Russian armed forces and that will be inscribed in the history of our fatherland. The foundation of a temple in honor of our victory has been laid. The head of state called the laying of the stone an important historical event in the spiritual life of Russia. Today, the first stone will be laid in the foundation of the Cathedral of the Resurrection of Christ. It will become the main temple of the armed forces, another symbol of the inviolability of our national traditions. There's not a
single random characteristic here. The height of the small domes is 1418 cm. The Great Patriotic War lasted 1418 days. The diameter of the so-called drum of the main dome is 1945 cm. The 45th year of the Great Victory.
Colleagues, we will have the main temple of the armed forces of Russia. I hope, colleagues, by the 75th anniversary of the victory in the Great Patriotic War, we will complete this construction, and we will have the main temple of the armed forces of Russia. Friends, hello to all. I once told you in the fall that our shitty commander, the Minister of Attack Sergei Kujabadik, Shoigu, began to build a magic temple, a huge one, a temple of the Russian military forces, where he would train combat mages and serve, accumulate mana, and where combat mages of the priests would also be trained, who would be thrown into the enemy's rear to send a curse on the state and steal mana from them. So, some details about this magical structure, the Universal Temple of the Russian Federation, have surfaced. In general, they decided to cast the steps to this temple from captured Wehrmacht equipment, from tanks of armored vehicles. Maybe planes will go there too. In general, now our Kujabadich Sergei Shoigu has issued an order to all his combat mages to go to museums, to villages, to forests, to collect Wehrmacht equipment, to transport it to the Ural Mountains to a smelter, where this equipment will be melted down, and steps for the Universal Temple of the Russian Armed Forces will be cast from it for combat mages. Well, accordingly, this is the first step of the step from Wehrmacht equipment. Then they, Kujabadich, will send their combat mages to the forest, where the battles of the Great Patriotic War took place, will make them dig up skeletons, skeletons of Wehrmacht soldiers. These bones, skeletons of Wehrmacht soldiers, they want to cover the floor with, well, like parquet. Well, and the walls, naturally, to be inlaid with the skulls of Wehrmacht soldiers. Well, because this gives mana, gives fighting spirit to our Orthodox, there are none there, who are bringing the Russian world to Syria. That's it. Well, and for complete patriotism, I would suggest hanging a plaque with the U.S. national debt in the temple, well, on the main wall above the icons. The
American national debt threatens the entire world economy. These are the words of Vladimir Putin at the summit on air. The Russian leader gives a press conference and many questions are devoted to solving global financial problems.
Look at the national debt of the United States. It is higher than the country's GDP has already become. This is generally a very alarming thing. This is an alarming signal.
And because everyone knows that the US national debt directly adds plus 100 to patriotism and fighting spirit. And you immediately want to give everyone the Russian world, put wooden toilets everywhere and crush all the geese and apples. Well, Polish, there, rotten European ones, yes, in which there is a troublemaker gene, which is. An Orthodox Russian person should not under any circumstances, because you can become infected with the troublemaker theory and Russophobia. Russophobia is our main enemy.
Perhaps the main change of this year was Russophobia, spreading to the world from America like an infectious disease. Russophobia, in fact, is a weapon that is used,